Oh, there's no 3, 2, 1. Can you delete this? You can edit this, right? All right. Okay. We are live, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Yasin Haransky. I'm the founder and CEO of Lunico and your host for today. And I've helped digitally transform businesses of all shapes and sizes, from publicly traded, multi-billion-dollar international organizations to local nonprofits and everything else in between. And just like you, I'm wondering where artificial intelligence and the disruptive technology that we've seen dominate headlines this last year fits in, and how. So that's why we've created the show, to bring on guests of all levels and all types of businesses to talk about AI and its business adoption, but strictly from a non-technical lens. We'll be touching on topics such as strategy, process, people, emotions, and anything else that we find relevant to the guests that we're bringing on. We're going to drop as much of the corporate jargon as possible and keep the discussion as simple as we can. We're going to be as casual as possible and have fun. Now, the name that we wanted for the show was taken, so we still don't have a name, guys. Please continue to give your name suggestions. We highly appreciate it. We're not going to let a nameless show stop us. So I'm going to introduce you to our first guest today. He's coming from sunny San Diego, California, and we've got Daron Giles, who's been fortunate enough to have worked in some of the most interesting advanced engineering projects of our lifetime. Most of his experience has been in aerospace manufacturing, where he's contributed to building parts that put people on space, in airplanes or defense products, highly strategic and life-changing assets, or in his latest role, where he's improving the efficiency in biotech manufacturing so that more medical solutions can continue to save and improve our daily lives. Now, Daron is not your typical IT director. He started out as a manufacturing engineer before becoming an operations manager and eventually taking the leap towards managing technology for a business. And like many engineers, he's a beer brewer. And him and I met when we worked down in California on a number of digital transformation initiatives for an aerospace manufacturing company. So, Daron, thank you for being on the show today.
Yes, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to talk to you. I always enjoy spending time with you and the team from Lunico.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Daron. So let's get to the questions, right? Just so we can kind of start on here, right? And for those that are watching the first time, we'll be asking some questions and kind of chatting about it. We might pull up ChatGPT as we need to, right? This is an AI related show. But let's start with just the basics first, right? And I am going to be asking this to everybody, Daron. So what does AI mean to you?
So AI is really, it's synthetic human intelligence, right? Human intelligence so far has only existed in humans, and now that technology has advanced to the point that it has, we're able to create artificial intelligence through computing and computing processes that's today comes close to simulating human intelligence. And I think the expectation is in the future it will exceed and then far exceed the intellect and capacity and capability of the human mind.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, I look at it a little bit similar to you, Darren. I think it's about giving the computer the ability to think, learn, and adapt. Right. If I can kind of simplify this, a lot of the technology that we're seeing. Obviously, when people talk about AI, I think everybody thinks about ChatGPT. But the truth is that AI technology really has been around for a lot longer than that. And some of it is integrated into our daily life and we don't really know it. But, this last year we've seen, last year, right? We saw a lot of claims in terms of what AI can do. We saw a lot of marketing. We saw just a lot of things being pushed out. Now let's break out what's marketing versus what's real. And it's really hard, right, to tell nowadays with content being so curated and done so well. But I'm just going to cut to the chase there. What do you think is bullshit when you look at AI and its application?
I think fear is the bullshit about AI, right? I think media. You mentioned media coverage over the generative AIs, ChatGPT and Bard, and it seems like everybody's trying to catch up now, or be the leader. But I think there's a lot of fear being probably pushed a little bit by by the media, right? That's the media. Everybody understands that media or that fear sells newspapers or ads now. And I really think people are worried about like, oh, the AI is going to take my job and AI is going to take over the world, and that's really it's fear. It's by nature not rational, and I'm not I'm not so worried about that.
So what do you think about the application of it? You think the applications that we're seeing that, hey, AI can solve this for you, AI can solve that for you. Do you think that they're feasible?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we're starting to see some really valuable use cases with the right now it's generative AI, with both language model AI and even just uh, generative images, and I think there's another bit of the fear is generative generative videos, spoof videos that would make someone like Joe Biden or Donald Trump appear to be saying things or doing things that they did not actually do, yet in a way that's indistinguishable to a human. That is that really Joe Biden doing that, or is that an AI?
Yeah, I've seen some of those. I've seen like some of the Joe Rogan and things like that. And you can tell right now that they're not real. But I feel like, how long is it going to be before you actually can't tell whether they're real or not, right? So let's shift over to kind of an area that you're very familiar with, right? So you've been obviously in the shop floor from as a manufacturing engineer to supporting the shop floor as an IT director in your role today. How do you think that this technology is going to make its way to the shop floor?
I think it's going to in the long term, right? It's going to have a really significant impact on the shop floor, uh, and the way I think we're going to see that is through enhancing and improving the work that the workers are doing on the shop floor to make processes and products more consistent, more reliable, higher quality, and those attributes are going to drive the other two goals, faster and lower cost. So I'd say I think artificial intelligence is going to enhance the operator, giving them the ability to do more reliably, more consistently, and it's in this first phases of digitalization, and in industry have always used technology to to hit the goals, right? Better, faster, and cheaper. And I think it's going to continue. We're going to see new use cases that continue to evolve manufacturing processes. And I think an exciting thing about it now, part of why I think it's coming of age, right, is the younger generations, the generations behind us have grown up on computers, and so they're entering the workforce with a lot more tech savvy than the previous generations, right? I think where in the recent past, finding manufacturing technicians and operators, machine operators that have that understanding, have both the experience, the hands-on manufacturing experience to know how things work, and they're afraid of computers because they're new and they're change. But nowadays, people entering the workforce grew up on computers. They can't imagine or relate to a time when computers didn't fulfill so many different functions in a pervasive way in our lives.
Right. And right now you've got a child going through the university, right? So do you think that the universities right now are preparing for that kind of new wave of what the generational worker is going to look like, and pushing some of these technologies so that they're not just ready for them when they kind of hit the shop floor, but they're the ones who are in a way pushing for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the younger generation, with the big lead from universities, they're pushing the technology, they're pushing the envelope. I mean, a lot of the funded research for AI began in academia, is still being pursued in academia, and I really feel like not just from university, because people become tech savvy, from an even earlier age, right? Without going to college, everyone has cell phones and is learning a lot of new technology that was just unfathomable 20 or 30 years ago. So I do feel like the universities are preparing people in a lot of different ways, but universities aren't solely responsible for that evolution that's happening, right? There's lots of factors around the world today that are driving the adoption of technology.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right on that there. So you've got you've got experience in aerospace. You got experience in biotech. Out of those two industries, right, and maybe some of the other manufacturing industries that you can think of, right? Where do you think that AI is going to pick up faster, and where do you think it's going to be taking a little bit more time?
I think what we're seeing right now with generative AI is going to see use cases in communications a lot, right? The smart chat agents are I think going to be it's a simpler use case, right? I think we're probably already seeing that implemented in large scales at large organizations, where they're able to not just replace human intellect with machine intellect, but enhance the human work, and let the computer do the hard part. I guess is the way I think of that. So generative AI responding to inquiries from customers and clients is the where I think we'll start to see initial use cases for business. I think there's a lot of other entertainment type use cases that will drive, like with the fake videos and fake imagery, fake audio, that has no purpose that I can think of in business today. But that doesn't mean that it won't turn into a useful tool in the future. We just don't know what that use is yet.
Okay. And then what are some of the, I mean, generative AI and just other uses of AI? It's not something that you just turn on, right? Like, what are some of the things that you think businesses need to be doing? Some of the key milestones or objectives that they need to meet before they're seriously considering going down this path?
Yeah. So I think of AI as kind of the top of a technology pyramid, and it's maybe even if you think of it like a skyscraper, it's the top floors that are still under construction as the skyscraper grows closer to the sun. I think a company has to have a solid foundation, and then the layers of the technology infrastructure and capability before trying to go for the end goal, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. Technology platforms and technology infrastructure for organizations is a lot of work, both to design and then build, and I think often overlooked is the maintenance activity also. A company has to have the infrastructure to know what the use cases are or should be, to really understand the need, the unmet need that the tool or the solution will solve. They need to have the basic infrastructure to manage that, and basic infrastructure used to be you had a server rack and batteries and network switches and all the other stuff, but with the cloud, that's not so necessary anymore. Now we're dependent on the internet, right? Without an internet connection, if you don't have everything on site, then you can't do anything. So so the basic IT infrastructure, the nuts and bolts, has to be in place, and it has to be supported and maintained. And then after that, the enterprise applications have to be in place in the ISA 95 pyramid, which is an organization that is produced by MESA, Manufacturing Execution Software Association. They talk about the different layers of the tech stack for manufacturing and manufacturing execution. You have to have each layer is a foundation for the next layer, and we have to we can't just build the top without building the support structure underneath it to develop uh, and maintain the application as they're created.
Yeah, otherwise everything's just going to come crumbling down, which
right.
makes a lot of sense, right? So I mean, you've got businesses that 2023 was all the hype about AI, right? And if you weren't throwing AI around, it seems like you were getting left behind. But should businesses really take a pause and kind of assess some of those foundational areas that you're kind of talking about? Do they need to redesign their business processes with AI in mind? Or is this just something that's like, okay, we're going to chip away a little bit about this AI piece and see what we can kind of play around with while we work on some of these foundational things? What do you think?
You know, I mean, really, I think it's both, right? You have to have the foundation, but you also have to have the vision, and the you talked about, should companies just start working on AI? I think, definitely not, right? Companies should always think about use cases and always have a good solid understanding of their business objectives, the performance, the metrics against those objectives, and understand where there are deficiencies and opportunities. And then instead of thinking about a tool that needs to be adopted because it's a nifty thing that everybody's talking about, you have to start with a use case, start with a why. Why do we want to do this? What do we want to get out of it? And in asking and answering that question of why, we'll get to the what and the how. But it's really important to start with, this is an unmet need in the business that we've identified, and this is how we're going to to plug that with a technology. If the foundation's not there, the use case won't be successful. That's just my experience. I've seen too many times where a project, an implementation, a big expensive project will fail, and it's because the infrastructure wasn't in place, the idea itself, the use case wasn't well thought out, the overall business process wasn't thought out. It was an initiative of, here's a technology or a tool, we want to use this tool, but not in the context of the business and the business process. It's just, we want this tool because it's the newest, shiniest bauble that everyone's talking about.
So you're basically saying it's got to be fit for purpose, right? We start with the why, we start with the purpose, and then we kind of work backwards within there to define how and what AI applications really fit in with that purpose.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, I think you're going to, a lot of organizations, when they really take the time to, look deeply and reflect deeply about their current technology stack, that, the next solution that's needed isn't always going to be an AI solution, right? The next solution that might be needed might be something a lot simpler, like, some level of factory automation or an enterprise resource planning platform or a planning and scheduling platform that solves a more immediate problem or challenge for the business.
Yeah, no, I agree there, man. So what do you think are going to be some of the challenges that kind of come with that, right? If you've got the executive that says, hey, we need to do AI because that's what the shareholders want, or that's what the market is demanding, or that's what everybody else is doing, right? That's obviously going to create some challenges for people like you who have to grab that vision and try to fit it in where maybe that purpose isn't quite clear.
I think it's I think the two biggest challenges they're fairly generic, right? They're not just unique to AI or technology. It's time and money, right? I think that when companies are considering a technology and planning a project, it's got to fit in the budget. If it's capital budget or operational budget, it's got to fit. I've seen too many times where a project will fail because it's not adequately budgeted, right? We think, oh, we're just going to do this project, and there's going to be one guy sitting in the corner doing this thing for 6 months, and then magically we have a system implemented for an enterprise or for a site within an enterprise. That's not a recipe for success. And I think that companies have to be really objective about technology is not cheap. Um, Computer systems can, if they're poorly designed and implemented, can be money pits. And the difference between a solution or a system that's a money pit versus something that's really truly transformative and value added to a business can start with the idea or the funding, right? The best idea in the world with insufficient funding can't happen. And the same way that if a project is set out with a unrealistic timeline, that can also lead to a failure.
Yeah. So who do you think should be leading these AI initiatives?
That's a good one, right? It's kind of a hot potato that gets batted around in different organizations. Where I think I've seen it be most successful is when organizations have an operations technology group that is not necessarily the IT organization and not necessarily operations organization, but the bridge between the two. Like you mentioned in my background, that's where I've managed to find my niche in companies, is bridging the gap between operations, even engineering and operations. What does the business need versus what is the art of the possible today? What can we really do? What can we really pull off? And what can we accomplish within the time and cost constraints that are set for us?
Now, that's who you think should be leading that, right? And maybe a lot of organizations don't have that organization that you're referring to. Who do you think is actually going to be leading most of the AI implementation projects?
It feels like AI is so new that it's more of an IT challenge than anything else, right? It's so much of the effort is going to be first understanding what you need, and being able to define your requirements in a way that a system developer can actually turn that into a solution, and all the way through actually building, designing and building, or working with a third party, an outside organization to work the design and build activity. Every system, every project is going to have a champion, right? And the champion, it matters less what part of the organization it is than that they're a strong champion and that they're well supported by the business.
Right.
Projects where the champion or the owner is, they're doing this in their spare time. It's not a primary role or responsibility, tends to, it means essentially that the project is deprioritized at the leadership level. And that's, that's another recipe for a failure or
Kind of coming
for
back to that
disappointment.
time thing that you're referring to, right? The person has to be able to kind of have the time. They've got to be able to facilitate the requirements from different parts of the organization, right? Because we talk a lot about operations, and I know that's where your focus is, but a lot of the use cases that we're seeing where AI can add a lot of value is outside of operations, right? On some of the more business supporting functions. So you probably want somebody that can facilitate not just their needs, but the needs of the entire business. And I feel like that, is going to be a tough thing to figure out, especially when you're trying to figure out something that is relatively new to most people, right?
Right.
So let's talk about some of the skill sets then, right? That some of the people here, whether you're the one leading the initiative or whether you're the one kind of playing a role in the initiative, right? Like, and you talk about the universities and the next generation and kind of workforce. So what are the things that you would be looking for from these next generational workers?
Just thinking about my own background and what I think has helped me progress and become what I am today is a really broad and general understanding, right? I think universities do this fairly well, right? There's you can become a specialist in a narrow niche field, or you can be generalized in your education, learning, and even really capacity in the workforce. I fit in the latter, right? I started as an engineer and had the opportunity to go back to school and get an MBA and learn about operations and finance and accounting and basically all the different aspects of running a business. I think that there's no one skill set that is or one talent that's always going to be required. I think it's the tech savvy, the background, that foundation layer of not being afraid of technology. I think we can take that for granted in the next 10 to 20 years because everyone will have a baseline of technology savvy that far exceeds what most in my generation and certainly most in our parents' generation had brought to the workforce. But I think it's really going to be an understanding of what is the business, what is the business model, how do we what is our product, what is our service, how do we make money, and being able to see the big picture, right? Seeing the forest and the trees.
Right.
I think it's very important to be able to work. We talk about the 30,000 foot level, very high level overview of an organization, what's going on, but also in the weeds, right? At sea level, and I think a really important attribute in successful employees in the future in technology is going to be that diversity and broadness of understanding. One of the things that I heard. It was my undergraduate advisor talked about when he talked about PhDs. He wasn't disparaging PhDs, right? He was a professor. He obviously had one of his own, but he said, when you get a PhD, you're learning more and more about less and less until you know everything there is to know about nothing at all. and so I think that's like that has a place, right? For that, for the person who's going to develop the next AI technology that's going to change the world. Like you got to be that focused. But to the underlying technology isn't the solution, right? The underlying technology is the enabler, and the solution is putting together the unmet need with the technology that solves it in a profitable use case.
That's a very good point, Daron. I think we're gonna have to clip that, man. I really like the way that you phrased that. So it's really having understanding, being able to look at the big picture, and really being able to connect different elements to what you're doing, and everything tying back to that purpose, right? Making sure that what you're delivering and what you're working on is connected to that purpose.
As I'm sitting here thinking about it and hearing you, kind of repeat it back to me, I think that there's an intellectual curiosity that's also a really important attribute in technology, right? I think that in IT in general, we say that if you're not always learning something new, then you're falling behind because things evolve so rapidly, and something that's necessary for someone to be willing and able to continue learning, to be a lifelong learner, is a curiosity, right? I'm thinking about, we're operating, 30,000 foot level down to sea level, and I'm thinking, and the real tech leader needs to have that curiosity where, he sees the forest, he sees the trees, and he's willing to get down on his hands and knees and, dig through the dirt and the undergrowth to see what's going on underground, right? That curiosity, because you never know, right, where the next solution is going to come from. It's probably not in an area that you're already thinking about, because there's so much capability and businesses have so many unmet needs that, the challenge isn't finding a problem that needs solving. It's finding the best problems, or the biggest problems that need solving first, and then taking the time to understand the problem even before you start working on the solution. Really understand the problem, and then to to start thinking about, okay, the curiosity again, researching what's the art of the possible, and what's the art of the possible, in the near future, given the pace and rate of change, and then being able to take all that and structure that into a project or a plan that really builds this new enabling feature.
That's very interesting that you kind of frame it that way, right? Because that's one of the things that obviously, as we look to integrate this technology into our own offerings and kind of what we do, is one of the things that we've been struggling with, right? You've got these paradigms in terms of what you're used to and how you're used to solving things. And now you've got this new access to this technology that can completely shift things. But you're going to miss it if you don't really challenge yourself and even just be curious about it. And it's not even like a malicious thing, or you're trying to consciously omit it, but it's just you don't know what you don't know until you start playing around with it. And the joke I make with the team all the time is like, you gotta fuck around to learn, right? And it's true, and it boils down to kind of a lot of the stuff that you're saying. You got to play around with it. You got to see its uses. You got to see where it's good, where it's not good, and I think then you can really carve out a path forward.
Yeah, and that really goes back to curiosity, right? You have to, not everyone has that curiosity, that intellectual curiosity to say, well, there's something I'm interested in. It seems to have no relevance to my role or my occupation today, but I'm curious, and that curiosity is going to enable learning that may or may not, in the end, enable a new solution to be developed.
And I want to touch on that may or may not, right? Because that's where organizations need to be open to experimenting. And we're talking about the context of time and money and all these kind of factors that play a role in it. Experimenting isn't really a word that people like to throw around when time and money is concerned, especially from a business perspective. But the truth is, to really maximize and understand as well, to align to a lot of the messaging that you're saying, you're going to need to experiment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, really, when you were talking about that, yes, it really reminded me of, the difference between the old waterfall approach to projects versus the agile methodology, right? Where in a waterfall approach, you tend to start with a lot of effort on requirements, trying to capture all the requirements, and then spend a large amount of time building the one monolithic solution that meets all the requirements. Which, in a lot of cases, if it's just not thought out quite well enough, or if something happens or changed, or your thought leader wasn't quite curious enough and he didn't know what was really possible or what the real need was, you can end up with a failure, right?
And to add to that too, right? A lot of this technology has very heavy dependency on things like data quality, right? And especially the higher up the chain that you go, the more disconnected that some of the executive team members are from the state of quality of their data, of their systems, of their processes, and whatnot, right? And that's just natural with any hierarchy, right? That you've got in the business. And so, AI, machine learning, and all these kinds of tools will need to really build on data and the quality of it. So what kind of role do you think that that's going to play with experimenting things and running into, we thought we could do this, and on paper we can, but when we see what we got to work with, we have this one ingredient that we just won't be able to make the dish with because it's a rotten ingredient, or it's not sour enough, or it doesn't have the right acidity that's needed to really turn this dish into a 5-star meal.
Yeah, I think specifically data quality is a very important part of the evolution of technology systems, right? And I think you're absolutely right. Data is inherently the lowest level. That's the C-level detail, and executives and leadership tends not to be as closely connected to the data as you need to be able to objectively assess, is this high quality data? Do I even have the data that I need to enable a use case that I'm thinking about? Right. So going back to, sorry about that, just had a distraction for a moment. Going back to the idea of data quality, right? I always think of a pilot for a project, right? An experiment to say, okay, this is our objective. We want to try to do something this way. We can design a waterfall project, and then $1 million or more, and try to do something, or we could do it as a quick and dirty, like let's hire an intern and have them, give them 6 months or 3 months and set them loose with a really general objective and see what he comes up with. I think it's gonna create a couple outcomes, right? First is you'll get some objective results that tell us about the quality of the underlying, the foundational systems and the data that they contain. It also tells us about the quality of the processes that are responsible for creating and maintaining that essential business information. With I forget who it was when they said, data is the new oil, right? Data is the new most valuable thing in business because it can be monetized in a bunch of different ways. There's different, just like there's different qualities of crude. I think there's light sweet crude, and there's the oil sand stuff that we're digging up out of the ground that is maybe abundant but not quite as easy to dig up, right? We have to really, it's not just oil. It's high quality or low quality, and oil companies know all about that, right? Same way organizations, enterprises need to understand their core value, their underlying value, the data in their systems, and what it is, how valuable it is, and how to increase that value, how to derive value from it.
Right. And I think when that context was thrown out there about data being the oil, a lot of it had to do with the value is not in this raw form, but more so in being processed and being refined and everything else there, so that it can turn into energy. Right. Oil to you is not valuable in any way, but what comes from it is valuable to you. Right. It powers your house. It powers your vehicles. It creates your clothes. It does a number of things. So, let's talk about the not just the data element of it, but more so shifting towards learnings, right? Because when you look at AI integration for a business, it's a similar type project to previous digital transformations or previous system implementations, right? You've got a current state that is going to change into a future state, and technology is going to be the driver behind that, or the enabler, as you kind of say, right? But it's still a people business. It's still driven by the people that work within there and operate it. It's still dependent on the data and everything else there. So let's talk about some of the things that went really bad or really good, right? That you've been a part of throughout your career on similar projects, and anything that you can share here with the audience.
Sure. Yeah. I've always said the best example is the example of what not to do. And, my understanding, I think it's reported that something like 2/3 or 3/4 of all ERP system implementation projects will fail in one way or one measure or another, right? A failure might mean just not achieving all of the objectives of the initial project, or, failure could also be late or over budget. But, understanding that an example of what not to do is some of the useful things or the most useful cases to learn from. I think the, time and budget again, and then I think also just the idea of respecting reality. An organization needs to be very objective and realistic about, this is where we are today, and given what we have in our wheelhouse today, are we capable of designing, building, implementing, and maintaining an application, a tool, a use case to do whatever it is the company wants to do next, and making sure that that's objectively estimated and is adequately resourced, both with time and money.
So you got to have that organizational honesty is a must. What is kind of what you're saying when you're starting one of these journeys?
Yeah, respect for reality. Got to honor reality, respect reality, and objective reality. Not the world according to Daron, but the world according to Daron and all the other objective observers that are seeing the same thing.
Right. So what else would you say is kind of a good learning to make sure that the AI project doesn't become a money pit, but it actually becomes a transformative, value-added implementation?
I think a key success factor in any sort of a technology or implementation is again, going back to the leadership, having that solid core ownership, and having that you know having that celebrated, and having that responsibility bestowed on the leaders in the organization that really have the capability and the charter to go accomplish the objective of the project. I'm thinking back of the in the intro you mentioned our past experience working together at an aerospace company in the Los Angeles area. We had three individuals. If you remember, you came up with the term MIT, right? Because it was I think it was Michael, Ian, and Tamara, and MIT, right? I mean, it sounds good. It rolls off the tongue. And MIT were empowered. They were taken out of their day jobs for, I think it was 6 or 9 months or so, to focus on the project. Being an ERP implementation project, 3 full-time resources from within the business was the right amount of resource. I think the organization was about 300 people at that time. So, it was 1% of the organization was dedicated on the project. And that project was really a wild success, in large part attributable to the focus of that really strong leadership team. And that was enabled because the business leadership was very objective about this is what we need to do to be successful on this project. Now you probably remember better than I, because I joined the company in the middle of the project. I think that that reality was realized after failing a couple of times, right? There was an initial implementation consulting group that failed because I think they were probably the lowest bidder and didn't provide the time and support to the project. And then there was a second consultant that took over the project leadership, and I think I was a one woman show, and didn't have the consensus and buy-in, wasn't able to form the consensus and buy-in with the leadership at the site, or the more executive leadership in the company that really had to pay the bills. And after the first 2 attempts failed, and when Lunico was brought into the project to really lead and finish out the project that had been started and sort of been floundering for I don't know, I think it was close to a year or so by the time you got involved in the lead role. The business had learned very objectively it's not going to work if we don't adequately resource it.
Yeah, and I do recall the initial conversations. They were involved early on in the project, but they weren't committed, right? And I think there's a big difference between involving people and committing people. And I do recall a conversation with the VP of operations at the time, Ryan, and he was like, these are my best people. Like, you're asking for the best people that we have on here, right? On our shop, and they're representing engineering, they're representing operations, they're representing quality. And it's like, we really need them on there to deliver operations. But he saw strategically how important it was to commit those 3 people, and that it'd be better for the longevity and the success of the business to commit them to the project, because he realized it was transformational, so that it could lead to better results. And yeah, it was a 6-month commitment, and it was going to be hard transitioning them and all of that kind of stuff. But that in the end, it would be worth it, because it would have a much stronger foundation, better business processes, and it would be something that's aligned to their business and in an objective and a fit for purpose way. And it worked out. It did work out in the end there, right? And I think that's probably the frame of mind that a lot of executives need to put themselves in. It's not just who can we hire that's easy, that, like you said, the interns that can come in and kind of execute the work on paper, because it says that you must gather requirements, and this person can gather requirements, and more think about who are the people that need to be committed to the project, so that this can be successful, and so that we can get the value that we're looking for from this disruptive technology. Otherwise, like you said, it's just going to become another money pit project that companies are going to be doing over and over and over again.
And yes, Listening to you, I think there's another benefit that came out of the project that actually really had almost nothing to do with the project itself. By taking the three MVPs of the organization, right, the best quality person, the best engineering person, I think best planner, and committing them to not their day job, but to another project that's going to transform the business, it created an opportunity for other people in the organization who are, I think, more than prepared to step up to fill those open roles during the course of the project. It actually grew the talent base in the company. If you're, I forget the planner's name, who was he had to print all the travelers, right? He stepped up in a huge way, and he was given a huge opportunity that had, the VP of operations had Ryan not taken the very difficult decision to pull his best resources out of operations and put them on this project, he actually improved the operational team because he gave some people some new experience that they might not have had an opportunity to ever have in that business. And that grew the overall talent pool in the business. That helped evolve, not the systems, but the employees. And that, I think that's part of the forest and the trees, right? I mean, we took people who were at maybe operating at a 500-foot level and moved them up to 1,000 or 5,000-foot level, so they had bigger picture, bigger responsibility, bigger roles, bigger shoes to fill, and man, they were just so successful.
Yeah, that's a good point there, and I think midterm and long term, it makes sense in almost every single way that you can kind of think about it. It's that short term fear that I think holds you back a little bit, right? Because you're like, man, what am I going to do without Ian, running the travelers and being out there in the shop floor and coordinating things, right? I won't be able to rely on him to do that. Or if there's quality issues, Tamara's not going to be involved on that, right? Because she's got to be involved in this project, and things like that scare people. I think in retrospect, right, everybody can look at that project and say that was the right choice. And I think that Ryan looks at his operation, and he was able to get a lot of benefits from being able to commit that. But in the moment, it's scary, man.
Yeah, it feels like a big risk, right? It's a big threat to the current operation, right? To take your best people out of their day jobs, but it's part of the strategy. It's that was enabled in large part because they had the foundation. They had no single points of failure as one idea that always comes up, right? Is if you take your engineering manager and put them on a project, then you have to have somebody else that's able to step up, even in a temporary capacity, to manage an engineering function or engineering department. In a smaller or less prepared organization, you're not going to be able to do that.
So let me ask you this, Daron. For these type of projects, right? Do you think you need to do that? Do you think you need to be grabbing your best people, taking them out, putting them into this, or do they need to be fully committed, or is this something that they can be more involved in and somewhat committed to be successful?
Well, I don't think I wouldn't say it has to be your best people. It has to be the right people. In this case, right, it happened to be the right people for the task, were the best people in the organization. But when we talked about your idea earlier about, hey, do you start with a huge waterfall project, or do you start with experimentation? The best person to run a waterfall project is not going to be the best person to experiment and piddle around with a technology to find what is the art of the possible and how can we apply this to solve our problem. So I think it's not the best person, it's the right person. And often you don't know that until you're looking back on it. But I think that's part of the vision that a leader has to have is objectively, where am I in the organization? Can I afford to take the right people for this project out of their day jobs?
Right.
And will that have, will the negative short-term impact on the operation outweigh the long-term benefit that we expect to receive from the new solution?
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's have one more question here, Daron, right? Before we kind of wrap things up. So what advice would you give, right, to people in similar roles, right? Or maybe it's somebody who's going from operations, trying to transition into technology. What advice would you give them that could enable and empower them in the future?
Yeah, I guess I'd take that in two parts, right? What advice would I give to a business, and then what advice would I give to an individual or to an employee who's thinking about their career? So for business, I think it's really important to be objective, to objectively understand the strengths and weaknesses in the business and the opportunities that come with that. And so it's very important to have that solid, well-founded vision that's based in reality and respects and honors reality, the good and the bad parts of the reality, and to be just to take that and to be always making the best choices for the organization, and to be realistic choices for the organization. And then for the individual, I think it's I had this conversation with my kid last year when they were Luca graduated in June, right? So we were talking about career and career choices, and my advice to Luca was, most important thing about what you're doing is that you enjoy it, right? So don't take a job because you think you need a certain income, or because you think this title or this paycheck or this company is what you want to do for the rest of your life. Think about what you want to do now, what your short-term goals are and your long-term goals, and know that if you start doing one thing today, it does not mean that you're going to do that for the rest of your life. Be open, be curious, commit yourself to a lifetime of learning. And I think that's a recipe that makes, that will help any individual to grow, to evolve, and prosper, both personally and professionally.
Right. That's good advice. Very good advice, Daron. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, man. It's been great chatting with you. For all the listeners, right, if you're here at this point, thank you. We're still looking for a name, right? So if anybody has kind of any feedback or in terms of how the production went or whatnot, we'll welcome it. But we are looking for a name. So please email me or reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever you want to help us title our show. And if you know anybody that you think would be a great fit for the show and you want to get them in touch with me, please let us know. Daron, awesome to have you. As always, man. I hope to be back in California with you at some point, right? Drinking some beers over the beach. Hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, heck yeah. Yes. Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Really enjoy, time with you and, time in preparation in advance with, Gar and Sophie and, some of the other, consultants that you have at Lunico that I've known now for, I guess, going on like 5 years or so. So thank you again for having me. It's always great to talk.
Awesome,
call me anytime.
All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Cheers.